Arav almost scoffed. Easy for you to say, he thought, directed at the abstract concept of God. You don't have a project manager breathing down your neck. But the verse lingered. It prompted him to open a Bible app he hadn't used in months. He searched for anxiety, and the algorithm led him to 1 Kings 19 and the story of the prophet Elijah. As Arav read, a strange kinship began to form. Here was Elijah, a spiritual giant who had just called down fire from heaven in a spectacular display of God's power. Yet, immediately after this mountaintop high, he was fleeing for his life from Queen Jezebel's threats. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. "I have had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." Arab sat up straighter. This wasn't a sanitized, stained glass saint. This was a man who was burned out, terrified, and utterly defeated. He gets it, Arab thought. He knows what this feels like. The story continued. Elijah, exhausted, fell asleep under the bush. An angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." There was cake baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate, drank, and slept again. The angel came a second time. "Get up and eat," he said, "or the journey is too much for you." Arab's eyes welled up. "The journey is too much for you." It was the most compassionate sentence he had felt in months. It wasn't a rebuke for being weak. It was an acknowledgment of his struggle. God's first response to Elijah's breakdown wasn't a lecture, but practical care, rest, nourishment. Emboldened, Arav read on. Elijah traveled for 40 days to Horeb, the mountain of God, and took refuge in a cave. There, the Lord told him, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then came the spectacular displays of power. A great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. Arav's breath caught. His own life felt like that, a whirlwind of deadlines, the earthquake of his mother's illness, the fire of his own panic. He kept looking for God in a miraculous solution that would wipe it all away, a booming voice from heaven to silence the chaos. But the story had one more act. After the fire, there came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face, went out, and stood at the mouth of the cave. There, in the silence that followed the storm, God spoke, not in the dramatic forces of nature, but in a still, small voice. He listened to Elijah's fears, gave him new purpose, and assured him he was not alone. Araf put his phone down. The tight knot in his chest had loosened. The anxiety hadn't magically vanished, but its tyrannical power was broken. He realized he had been looking for God only in the big, dramatic rescues. But God was right here in the quiet of the night, in the simple, whispered truth that He was present. Closing his eyes, Arav did something he hadn't done in years. He began to talk. Not a formal, polished prayer, but a raw, messy outpouring of his fears, the project, his mother, the exhaustion. He presented his requests just as the verse in Philippians had said. He didn't hear an audible voice, but a profound sense of peace, a gentle whisper in his spirit settled over him. It was the assurance that he wasn't alone in the cave of his anxiety. The journey was too much for him, but it wasn't too much for God. The next morning, the problems were still there, but Arav faced them differently. He had eaten, he had rested, and he carried with him a newfound truth. Sometimes The God who commands fire from heaven chooses to speak in a whisper, reminding our anxious hearts, I am here.